Hey everybody, welcome to the City Rev Life podcast. My name's Craig. With me today is Pastor Robey and a special guest, the one and only John Birdsall. First time live on the podcast. What an honor. What an honor, Robey. What an honor.
I mean, can you believe it? What a day.
I can't.
Dear Diary, today was the day we finally got John
A
Birdsall.
monumental moment on the City Rev Life podcast. Well, we are going through the One Generation series, and this is our companion podcast. And so the One Generation series is obviously about the vision of the church, the vision that God has laid for us. But it's also, there's a financial aspect to it. And so that's kind of why we have John on here. So maybe, John, maybe for the audience, you can introduce yourself a little bit, your role here at City Rev, and how you got involved with this guy.
Absolutely. My name is John Birdsall. I'm the CFO here at City Rev. My wife and I joined City Rev about 7 years ago, and just loved the church, loved the team here, and we began serving in various capacities. I started serving
In
the tech team.
He began serving in like 10 capacities. Like,
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of things.
He just joined all the teams when he showed up.
He joined all the teams.
Yeah,
and
nice.
and you know, we do have John Birdsall, but the best part of the Birdsalls is Lorraine Birdsall.
Of course.
John's wife.
It's all about Lorraine.
That's right. So what are some of the ways you have served, though? What we should say?
So I've served on the tech team. Our son Sebastian also serves on the tech team. Lorraine serves with guest services. She's also done the translation. So certainly love our church and what we're doing here in the community. I also have been part of the audit committee for about 5 years as well, 4 years, and then of course just took the role as CFO just about a year ago.
So concurrently with what you're doing now as CFO at City Rev, what you've been involved in other businesses, corporations, especially in South Florida. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. My roles have predominantly been, surprisingly enough, in the cruise industry.
All right.
I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, moved down here, and just loved the tourist industry, and worked at Royal Caribbean, Norwegian Cruise Line, Virgin Voyages, and in various accounting capacities as controller and such. And currently, I'm the CFO, Chief Accounting Officer for a company called Tropic Supply here in South Florida near Sunrise.
Cool.
So John was one of the guys that we wanted to pull in on our audit team early on.
Yeah.
And our audit team is a group of usually 3, 4, 5, depending on the season and people's availability, of men and women in our church that have accounting backgrounds or various other financial backgrounds, and they review our finances quarterly and just help us have make sure everything's above board, make sure all the practices, wise accounting practices are followed. Why don't you fill in the blanks there, John, a little bit on the audit team, what they do?
Sure. The audit team is led by Walter Bustles. And as Robey indicated, we really focus on all the details within the financials. We look at expenses, we look at costs that we're paying, we compare against budget, and just do a very detailed deep dive into each line item.
Yeah, which I think is such an important part for us as a church to have that layer of accountability. I think that's a biblically mandated thing to do, is to have that layer of accountability. But it's something we want. I mean, these are all men and women that love their church. They have expertise financially, and that's just part of the body of Christ. Is we've got these gifts in our church, have them lean in. And so just this last year, especially as we're going into knowing that we're going into things like the Miami Springs campus launch and the construction parts of that, and then some of the other dimensions that we've been talking about in this One Generation push. We knew that it was a good season we're going to need some more help on our staff. So that's when John stepped in, and was just such a natural fit, and he's served our team so well. It's been great to have them have him serving in that capacity and just kind of helping us dial in some of those finances.
Yeah, I think it's so important for us because we're talking about this vision and financial series. And what we talked about last week and on the podcast was about the baggage that we can have when it comes to giving to the church. And so I guess just a chance for us to talk about that a little bit for someone that maybe has some of that baggage and is considering giving to the One Generation initiative, what are some of the financial processes that we have in place that they can kind of ease any fears that they might have about that?
I think you're right. I think that there's baggage, and we talked about this last week. I don't want to go back into it. And if you haven't heard that episode, I want to encourage you to go back because I think it was helpful. We all have those things. It's like, I think some of the baggage comes from not just the way it's talked about, but there's financial scandal out there. There are times that churches have mishandled, either intentionally, like it's like an embezzlement situation, or there's just something that's just illegal or immoral. But then there's other times where it's just been mishandled, not intentionally, just a lack of wisdom or just a lack of knowledge on the part of a church. And those are things we never want, either of those things anywhere near City Rev. We don't ever want any kind of immoral thing happening. We would never want that. We want to be as wise as possible. And God's given us so many great people in our church that have that kind of expertise. So we really try to have a really strict dialed-in process that we walk through year to year when it comes to budgeting, and also especially when big things like this series. So John really oversees the process. Why don't you speak, John, a little bit to the budgeting process year to year?
Sure. And absolutely, financial stewardship is really just paramount as we steward God's money.
Yeah.
First, I would say, to add to that too, Robey, the controls, having separation of duties with how payments are generated to suppliers and such. Those dual controls prohibit any ability for any fraud happening, which is important. From a budgetary perspective, we create the annual budget prayerfully, present that to our elder committee, and they, in detail, we review with us each line item and which each discipline is spending for the upcoming annual season.
Yeah. So that's just part of our, what we would call governance. So we have an elder team that just corresponds directly to that biblical category of those that are given oversight over the church. I serve as one of the elders. Pastor Dan Gostit serves as one of the elders. The rest of the elder team is comprised of what we would say is lay leaders. So these are leaders that are not on staff. So there's a majority of what we would call lay leaders. That's also part of the checks and balances. And then when it comes to ministry decisions, those are just how we operate the ministry. Those guys are there to really provide advice and counsel. But when it comes to a financial decision, we all have really one vote. And so we really want to handle the finances, the approval of the budget, those kinds of things together as a team. And by the time, and kind of in practical terms, by the time it comes to approve a budget, it's unanimous. We wait till we're at that place where there's comfort. I can't ever remember there being a budget that we passed, in more than 15, 16, 17, since I've been here, I can never remember where there's someone's just like, no, I do not like this budget. I mean, we really honor that kind of hey, what are we seeing here? And so we're just very careful with that.
A lot of conversation probably goes into it for a long time, and a lot of unity comes from it. That's good. That's good to hear. Yeah, I think when we think about managing a church, I feel like that's kind of behind the scenes, and so sometimes we just don't get a chance to talk about that a lot, or maybe if you are attending a church, you don't really get to see it. But I think the other part of it too is we know that the church isn't just a business, right? It's something different. And so I guess my question to you is, is it more than just business practices at play, or is there some biblical principles there in how we use our money as a church?
Absolutely. And it does feel very modern. It feels very corporate. And for some people, that's comforting. Other people be like, wait a minute, aren't we just, it's the church. It's the bride of Christ. And that actually might be somewhat off-putting and suspicious to others. It depends on where someone's approaching that. And so it is very biblical. On one hand, there's the clear call in Scripture to accountability, There's the clear call to wise stewardship and management and planning. I just think of all the Proverbs from Solomon about like planning ahead and thinking ahead and managing funds well. Like those are absolutely non-negotiables in the Bible. But even when we just think down to like, we have 4 categories of our budget. And even when we think about our church budget, those 4 things, each one of those parallels what the Bible says the people of God are supposed to do with the funds. So here are the 4 things the Bible says. When money is brought, whether it was in the Old Testament to the temple or in the New Testament to the apostles' feet, when the money is brought in, when we're giving, and all of our families, we're all giving back to the Lord. When we give back to the Lord, what is supposed to happen with that money? Well, four major things. One is reaching the lost, and that's obvious. I mean, it goes all the way back to when you think about the ladies that were the patronesses. We would say of the ministry of Jesus. Yeah. So there were these women in Luke chapter 8, and this is just one example, but there's these patrons are celebrated in the Bible because they funded ministries in order to reach the lost, whether it was Jesus, whether it was Paul, whether it was just the church operating together. So one is reaching the lost. The second one is provide for the needy. So it's reach the spiritually impoverished, but then just the physically, those physical needs. And so that's right out of the gate, Acts 2 and 4, when it talks about they brought things to the apostles to meet the needs of those in the church. Yeah. That's Old and New Testament, caring for the poor and the sojourner in Leviticus 19, widows and orphans in James chapter 1. So reach the lost, provide for the needy. The third one, and this is an important one that I think is worth taking time because it's talked about a lot in the scriptures, but it's catalyzing the shepherds. That's how we'll put it. So the Levites in the Old Testament were called to leave their homes and serve at the temple. And so part of when they gave back to God, this is in Numbers 18, this is in Nehemiah 13, there's in plenty of parts in Leviticus, other parts of the law, that went to fund the Levites' livelihood. This is how they ate while they were doing the work of the Lord in the temple. Yeah. That same concept is then taken into the New Testament, and they use the same language directly linking it to the Old Testament. And this is where those who are serving the church, because they're called to not pursue other jobs outside of the church, they're going to give their lives to serving and leading the church. They're going to shepherd, not as Levites, but as pastors. That's what the word pastor means. And so that same concept, it's the staff, essentially. It's to pay the salaries of the staff. A lot of times people think like, oh, that this professional clergy, that's this modern, only the modern church has that. The early church didn't have that. The New Testament church didn't have that. That's just straight unbiblical. I mean, that's just not the way it was. It's exactly how it was in the Old Testament, how it was in the New Testament, and so it's part of the faithfulness of modern times. So you've got reach the lost, provide for the needy, catalyze the shepherds, and then the last one is resource facilities. And what's interesting about this one is, and we get this snapshot of the early church in the book of Acts. It's just the first couple decades, and so they didn't have a lot of formal facilities. They were meeting in homes, which is very legitimate. That happens still all over the world. But there's definitely precedent all through the Old Testament of facilities. And there was funding that happened for the tabernacle, the first temple, Solomon's temple, refurbishing the temple, then refurbishing it again, and then the second temple as well, or what's called the second temple. It's really a resurrection of the first temple in the book of Haggai, which we're studying now. So over and over and over and over, it's talked about the funding for those facilities of worship. And it's obviously very important because the Bible usually lists in detail the amount given for those things. So 4 things: reach the lost, care for the needy, catalyze the shepherds, and resource the facilities. Because those are the 4 things mandated that the people of God do with funds that are given back to the Lord, that is the exact 4-quadrant breakdown of our budget as City Rev. So we have our ministry budget. Those are the things that are actually being spent to reach the lost. It's what buys waffle batter so that we can have Waffle Wednesday.
And pastelitos.
And pastelitos on Sunday, because if we didn't have pastelitos on Sunday, who knows what would happen? It's what funds the ministry. It's the kids' curriculum. I mean, we joke about the Waffle Wednesday, but it actually does fund the waffles. Yeah. But there's other things that like are more substantive. It's like what funds the kids' curriculum that we pay for, so our kids can be taught the Scripture. The Bibles that we give out to first-time guests. I mean, all of the stuff that's ministry expenses, on and on and on. And then reaching the needy. That's a lot of that. Not only do we have an internal budget for that when someone either comes to our church or is a part of our church that has a need, but a large portion of that is our outreach budget, where we have partners locally. So maybe, John, you can speak to some of those outreach partners we have.
Sure. We have a number of different outreach partners that include Love South Florida, Church United, Sheridan House Ministries, for kids, and also the Women's Hope Center.
Yeah, so
to name a few.
Yeah, so when you think about those, I mean, you think about the call to meet the needs of widows and orphans, and so I think about, so I think about you've got Sheridan House helping single moms in a lot of ways, kind of the modern day widow, and then For Kids helping foster children, in some ways kind of temporary orphans. And then you've got women that find themselves pregnant and in a crisis and trying to sort through their options. So we have Hope Women's Center helping them choose life and pick a godly option there, and resourcing them and helping them in a place of dignity. And so a lot of ways that the reaching the needy is through these really key partners. So reach the lost, reach the needy. Obviously, our personnel budget is catalyzing the shepherds, it's the staff, and then you've got the facility expenses. So that's the facilities and resourcing the facilities. So that's the rent payment at the Cooper City High School. That's the lease payment here at the West Pines campus. It's the mortgage payment at Miami Springs, and all of the expenses to upkeep those facilities.
So when we're talking about the money, John, how's it all tracked?
What we do on a monthly basis is we create the financial statements, the income statement, balance sheet, and then within the elder meetings, monthly elder meetings, we present the financials and how the church is tracking against budget for each of the line items on the income statement.
I love that. I think that kind of brings a lot of peace for me, even just personally, when I hear about it, like that makes a lot of sense. It's very logical. I think the one that, if we can go back to for a minute, would be to talk about personnel. A couple questions that would come up. One would be, that's where I feel like a lot of the baggage comes from, because how do you can put that as a category, but how do you make sure that category doesn't balloon out, right? Like where it's like, we're paying the personnel, but we know that people shouldn't be going into ministry to get rich. So how do we make sure that doesn't happen? And then I guess the other part of it would be, is the One Generation series connected to that at all? Is it connected to personnel? Like, if we're just going to ask these questions, right? These are important questions.
Let's get it all on the table. Yeah. Absolutely. Part of the baggage is when it comes to personnel. I mean, we all know the stories of the guy who's out there, on the televangelist who's, talking these single moms into like giving away their life savings, and then he's driving off in a Bentley, and you're like, I don't know, this is not good. That's a racket, is what that is. And so, there's two extremes I think that churches fall into when it comes to this. One is some churches, when it comes to, paying their staff, paying their pastors, it's like, well, we want them to be humble, and so let's underpay them. And so that they're like barely scraping by, and it's like their way of like keeping them humble, and like they're forcing a vow of poverty on them. And like, well, that's not good. I mean, that's not a spirit of generosity, and B, why do you want them to be stressed with financial worries all the time? In fact, Nehemiah 13, Nehemiah freaked out. He comes back as a governor, and all of these Levites, because they were so neglecting them, they all had to leave. Like they had to go and go back to their fields, and there was no one in the temple. And we don't really look at that. The very practical part of that is that, what we want for our staff and our team, we want them to be provided for. So they're focused on ministry. They're not focused on scraping by. On the other hand, there's another extreme. Like you can really overpay someone in the ministry. And like you said, like the point is not to get rich. Like we want to be generous, but we don't want people to be overpaid. And it's like, that's not what it's about. That's not why people are giving their money. It's not to, line the pockets of some minister. So you've got these kind of two dangers either way. And so what we have to figure out, okay, what's an expression of generosity, but what's fair, and what's the right amount to resource staff. So we have a very strict policy and procedure on how we go about that. Why don't you speak a little bit to that, John, about that process?
Sure. So on an annual basis, along with the budget, we utilize outside sources to validate the salaries of the pastoral team as well as the staff. We also make sure we right-size the staff. In other words, the size of our church, we don't want to be overstaffed with full-time employees as well as part-time employees. So the process we go through within the budget is we look at not only just South Florida salaries for pastors, but we also look at it nationally, and we take those averages and we ensure, as you're indicating, that it's in alignment with what's in other church organizations.
Yeah, so because there's other churches, many, and I think most, like, are trying to do it right. They want to take care of the staff, but they're trying to do it appropriately. And so there's a lot of great resources and surveys out there, and we can map out where everyone is supposed to be for their role and make sure that people are taken care of within reason.
Sure.
That brings the other part of your question.
Yes.
And I'm glad that you're bringing it up, because sometimes I get these questions. And so I think sometimes people wonder, like, when we do a series like this, like, is any of this going to the staff? Like, is Pastor Robey, is this going to Pastor Robey?
Yeah.
I mean, they'll be like really transparent on this. So Rebecca and I have a minivan that's 11 years old. Mm-hmm. It drives now like it's 20 years old. Okay. It's like right now I'm driving it because there are some mornings I'm not sure it's going to start. Right. That's mainly because when it comes to vehicles, I'm really cheap and I want to drive it till the wheels fall off. Yeah. Okay. That's just a personal decision on that part. But there's an honest thought that I've had, like, and we've been talking like, hey, we need to get a new car here soon, just honestly for like safety reasons. It broke down on the highway not long ago, and it was a little bit nerve wracking. So like, they're for safety reasons and stewardship reasons, like, okay, we need to get a new car. But I've had the honest question, like, okay, we're going into this one generation fund, and then if we get a new car, and it's not like we're going to get a Mercedes, but like we're going to, that I wouldn't anyway, even if I could. That's just not my personal preference.
Sure.
I had the honest thought of like, oh no, if like this is when we get a new vehicle, like people are going to wonder, did that come from the one generation giving? And so I'd rather just put it on the table. Like, absolutely not. Like, there's three things that this is going towards. It's going to, and we've talked about this in the mission briefing. If you haven't been to a mission briefing yet, please get to a mission briefing. But there's the launch of the Miami Springs campus. There's the continuing to innovate digital discipleship. Mm-hmm. We've got an app that we're working with over the next few years. And then it's the establishing of a hub campus. That's what this is going towards. And this does not affect our personnel budget at all. Like, this is not for that. And in fact, we as staff feel, and this, Craig, we've been talking about this, and we as an elder team, as you know as well, John, like we as leaders, like we're leaning in too. Like we're at looking and saying, hey, we're going to lead the way. So we're actually saying, if we're not going to ask anyone else, as we're part of the church body. When we say the church, it's all of us included. We're all like leaning in. How can we, sacrificially give towards this? Because we believe in it as much as we're talking about it. And so I had one person say one time, I remember many years ago, we were doing something similar. And there was a meeting with a guy, he was a business owner. And we were talking about it, and he was processing what he was going to do to sacrificially give, and he did, and it was really a powerful, beautiful thing. And I said, yeah, Rebecca and I are praying about this. Like, what are we going to give towards this as well? Because we want to give very sacrificially, and we did. But when I said that to him, he's thinking like a business owner, and he said, well, I know you're going to sacrificially give, but I mean, you could just raise your salary and, just give out of that. And I'm like, wait, what? That's what you think is like how we operate? And I think in his mind, he's a business owner. He sets his own salary. He owns all of it. And I guess he was just transferring that to me and was misunderstanding. I am not the business owner here. There's a chief shepherd. His name is Jesus.
Yeah.
All of this belongs to God. I have a salary that I do not set. The elder team, the lay elders, set that according to these surveys and do a great job of making sure that it's appropriate. And we're going to be like the Barnes household, like the Birdsall household, and the Stevens household are going to be like everyone else in the church, where we're seeking the Lord, saying, God, what do you want us to sacrificially give? And I, just like everybody else who leans in like that, I've seen the Lord's provision profoundly in crazy ways outside of my salary. I've just seen the Lord come through in amazing ways in response to that. And so I think it's good that we're asking the questions and talking about it. Let's just get it all out on the table. We want to have transparency. We really believe that we're operating in a way that honors the Lord.
Yeah, I think it's important for us to talk about it and talk about the financial processes. I appreciate you guys taking the time. Appreciate you, John, for being here and talking through it. I think for us as a church, we just want to make sure, hey, we're covering all of our bases, and if we're given to something that's being handled well, that's being stewarded wisely. So, I appreciate that conversation. If you're just tuned into this episode, I encourage you to check out the other episodes in this podcast series, and we're going to keep it going as we go through the One Generation series. And so stay tuned, stay with us, and join us again next week on the City Rev Life podcast.
Thank you so much for listening to the City Rev Life podcast. Feel free to subscribe and leave a rate and review. We love it when you share it with your friends on social media, so don't forget to tag us at cityrev.church. If you're interested in more resources, download our City Rev Church app and follow us on social media. Have a great day.